First, what is SaaS?
So SaaS means software as a service. And that might sound sort of like weird, like, well, what else is software? But let me take you back to the days of old. Something that's taken for granted. But SaaS was actually a massive, massive breakthrough. If you go back to, I mean, really, it wasn't even that long ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago in some places, but certainly 15, 20 years ago, the way that companies operated in terms of their, the way they used computers and software, it actually had a lot to do with hardware. Like when people talk about, using computers in your business or computing, it used to require, like, your company or your organization would have a big computer room and have a bunch of hardware. So you'd have to hire somebody, consult with somebody. What are we going to use? We're going to use this IBM system or whatever. And they're going to come install all this stuff. Okay. All this physical hardware. They're going to probably run cables throughout your whole office if they aren't already there. So that all these computers can be connected and wired together. Wi-Fi didn't even exist. If you wanted to connect, you had to have a physical wire. I used to do that, by the way. I used to install computer network cables at businesses. And then you'd have like a full-time, like an IT team that are there, maintaining and all this hardware. But then you have the software component. And the software, the programs that are running, this was like you would have a physical disk or CD-ROM, and you would have a big, like you'd buy a massive software package. Say you had a 50-person organization. I used to work for a nonprofit when in the pre-SaaS world. And every year they would have to buy, they'd do a license for every single user that they had, this massive software package, and it would get installed. It'd take a long time. It'd be like a whole day where you're like, okay, we're doing a new install, of the newest. And it'd be like a suite. Maybe it was from Microsoft or Blackbaud or, whatever, whoever the provider was. And there might be a couple different softwares you had, but it was mostly like you needed everything in this big suite, and it all be installed. And get this, people could connect to the internet, but mostly what they were using was the intranet at work, right? So they had a network. It was not connected to the World Wide Web. It was just of people within that organization sharing files back and forth on the one software that they had purchased for file sharing or for their database where they kept all their customer information. And these are maintained by the IT department who works at that company. If something breaks, they're the only ones that can fix it. And they've got a huge backlog all the time. The company's website was also, maintained by them. All of the data that the company had, customer data, employee data, payroll data, financial data, these were all run on software that came in a physical disk and was installed either on the central server or sometimes also individually on every single computer of every employee. And that was being stored usually on site in a big giant server in a closet somewhere. So everything was there, it was all local, and you're just connecting. It's like, it's like if you stored everything on your PC and you were not connected to the internet, but then you just, like, everybody else was connected to that same PC in like a giant room or an office. It is really, really crazy. So what happened with SaaS was you had two big breakthroughs. Number one was you had off-site hosting. And this was made possible because of advances in, really the infrastructure of the internet, speed, bandwidth, et cetera. So now all of your, like, data, your storage doesn't need to be stored locally. And even your processing, right? Even like some of this stuff, which sort of came later, the things as the computer is doing its tasks, you don't need some big giant server or a local machine on site that can do that. You can do all that over the internet. And so somebody else can specialize in having a data warehouse, and you just get to be the one who uses that data in your business, right? And it can be private so that data warehouse knows that, this data is only for this company, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what that meant was the capacity. Think about if everything's running off of a server that you have in the closet, say your website, and we had this at the organization I worked for, you have a peak time. Let's say the president of your nonprofit, like the one I worked at, goes on national news and mentions some new study you've published. the spike in traffic is going to be insane, and your hardware has to be able to handle that. Maybe it's going to be 1,000 times what it normally is. So you have to have this hardware that can handle 1,000x spike. Otherwise, everything's going to crash. And then after that spike, you still have to pay for hardware that you're never going to use maybe ever again, or maybe once every couple of years if you get a similar spike, right? And the inefficiency and insanity of that. And so then you think about the ability to have everything off site. Now you can pay in a metered way. You have this massive warehouse that's like, yeah, you need more bandwidth, you need more hosting capacity, you need more. If it spikes, we'll handle it and we'll just send you a bigger bill, just like with your electricity bill, right? So it was this ongoing utility instead of this physical thing. You know, it's like the difference in your home. If instead of hooking up to the electrical grid and just paying per month for whatever you decided to, whatever you used, if you had to have like your own little nuclear plant or coal plant at your own house, right, and maintain it all the time, that's kind of what it was like. So offsite hosting. And then the second thing was a business model change that SaaS brought through. And this was sort of a result of the ability to do all this stuff over the internet and stream it in. And that's a monthly fee business model. Instead of this massive, big annual or multi-year contract where you make a deal with some software provider to say, we will install the entire Microsoft productivity suite for 120 users, and we'll do this massive install, and it'll be on everybody's machine and our machine, and we'll pay you this huge amount. And then in 2 years, we'll have to renegotiate, blah, blah, blah. And everything's kind of locked into that. Instead of that, you can be like, well, it's not physically installed here. It's not hosted here. It's being streamed over the internet. So we can just pay per month for whatever services we want. And what that created was an unbundling of software tools. Instead of having this massive suite that has everything in it that your company needs, from email to calendars to databases to financial stuff to payroll processing and usually they were all done pretty badly, but you needed them all to be in a suite because it was too hard to have big giant installs of different types of software, et cetera. So they were all kind of done mediocre. Now you can have all that disaggregated and unbundled. And somebody can be like, I have a software, literally all we do is run payroll once a week. That's all the software does. Super simple and clean. It's really nice. And you pay like $5 per employee per month or $1, like whatever, right? And you don't even need your IT team to support it. If you hook up, you pay your monthly fee and something breaks, you contact us, our IT team, and we fix it. You don't need anybody on site. You don't need to tap any resources for your internal IT team. This just blew the doors wide open. Because back in the day, I ran a program at this nonprofit. It was a new program, and I was like, we're going to have a blog. We're going to have our own website separate from the main site. We're going to do some different stuff. I was trying to move fast. I was not going to go to IT and get on their huge wait list for them to like launch a new site for me on our subdomain. And then every time I wanted to change, I would have to go ask them. And it was the very early days of SaaS stuff. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to just do it myself. I'm going to go spin up WordPress and just create a WordPress site. I'm just going to buy a URL on GoDaddy and with the company credit card, and I'll apologize later if they get mad. And I'll set up the site. And then I'm going to, I'm not using their crazy Microsoft Outlook, whatever. I'm going to use Google Calendar for myself, and I'm going to flow everything into my Gmail account, and I'm going to use Calendly. And then like internally with other teammates, we would like use tools. Oh, I'm going to use a Trello board for this instead of the big software suite that we had bought. And suddenly the IT department isn't this bottleneck and this like central planning source of, control and power that everybody's always waiting on. Everybody in their individual department. Oh, I want my sales team to be able to have a really nice database. Yeah, we'll just get a subscription to Batchbook or Salesforce. And eventually Salesforce, took over everything. And they can just use it, right? And then when they quit, we just kill their subscription. But we got this database. It's all hosted in the cloud. So it just blew everything wide open. And I guess I'll end this history lesson with this analogy. Back in the day, using computing and, software tools for business, it was like, obviously it was better than not having a computer at all. It was great. Huge, huge gain in productivity. But the way that it was done, it was like a planned economy where everything had to be argued and justified and approved by some central body, and it was all hosted under one roof, and they told everybody what they could do, and everyone just had to adapt to whatever the procedure was. Here's our new CRM. You all have to do this and whatever. It was very stifling, and it had very little efficiency, but it was very uniform, right? So it had like very standard procedures that were very stable. They lasted for several years usually. The SaaS revolution comes. Everything's done online. You're paying monthly for all these individualized tools. It's like a free market, a brand new free market. It's like a market that just got free and just opened up, which is innovative, experimental, it's fast, but it's also a little chaotic and disconnected. It's not uniform. How come our marketing team is using Trello for their task management and our sales team is using Asana? We got this guy over here who's using Google Tasks, and none of these things are connected. It's all kind of a mess. You get some of that chaos. And I think what we are moving into now in the last few years, and this is going to be a huge continuing trend, is a mature free market, right? Where, okay, you've unleashed this free market and it's the Wild West. It's great and it's wonderful and crazy, but it's a little chaotic. Now, sort of this co-opetition where it's like, okay, you have this modular, very adaptable, very innovative stack of things you can pick and choose, and from this completely unbundled experience. Everything's totally unbundled. But now you're getting like a rebundling in a much more efficient and adaptable way. It's more modular. It's rebundling, but you're not stuck in this one stagnant bundle with one source of failure and pain points and all that stuff. You still have the modularness, the speed of the unbundled experience, but it's integrating well. Things are playing nicely with each other. And that's where you're getting an incredible, look at all the big winners in the software world in the last, especially 5 years or whatever. They all integrate with each other. Slack, everybody uses Slack in their workplace. Every other software tool they use integrates with Slack. Oh yeah, you want your Trello board, you can just post right to it directly from a Slack channel, and vice versa. You want to be able to have, whatever tools you're using, MailChimp can automatically beam stuff into your Slack channel, right? And that's where you're getting this disaggregated stack. It's got the benefits of decentralization, but bringing back some of the benefits. There are benefits of centralization, not centralization at the point of a gun, of course, but centralization in terms of uniformity and things working well together. So that's kind of a history lesson overview of what is SaaS.